sessions by Dr. Edmar Soria that just arrived from Lerma, I guess, the surroundings of Mexico City, and came to Morelia specifically for these two sessions with us. So please welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here and to share some ideas about some of my works and about a couple of topics for multimedia. And so I'm gonna start talking about the theme of post-Anthropocene. I don't know if anyone has ever heard about it. So it's post-Anthropocene is a term that intends to be like an era after the Anthropocene, which the Anthropocene is the geological era that we are living right now, which is characterized by the human impact on the planet because of our activities. You know, it involves any kind of, for example, climate change and all this stuff that are so concerning. So the idea of post-Anthropocene is mainly, or was mainly developed by people at the architecture, and people are design, people who make all this kind of stuff, people who design like these prototypes and for new biological species and everything about it. And it's many of these people make their work in a framework that it's about speculation. You know, the possible futures or speculation. And what's the idea about the speculation? Well, we can go from an initial idea, from an initial problem, a real problem at the Anthropocene era, and think about possibilities about that. You know, for example, the paper that I have right here is a paper from Taro Narahara, which is an architecture, and he's studying on architecture designs for speculative research. So this, for example, is an habitat rendered for a complete inhospitable region of the planet. So they state the idea that that the Earth is no longer habitable in their natural geographical scenarios. So they are thinking about habitat structures for trying to survive in that habitat, right? So this is a very real example of people who is working the theme of the post-Anthropocene. So I just want to, if you can see this is an actual, it's not just a nice looking render, it's an actual architectural idea with all their functionalities designed and all that. And many of my work is centered about this idea. You know, the post-Anthropocene, the speculative research and the possible future. So in this brief working sessions, I want to share with you some ideas and some workflows that maybe you could use in your personal multimedia research or multimedia artistic projects for creating and developing procedural animation and doing some visualization and sonification products through this concept. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, comments, at any time, please feel free to interrupt me. So, this is the, this is the very basic beginning for post-anthropocene research. And I just, for reference, I want to show you a couple of ideas that I usually work on for the visual content. For example, this is a work which is called Memories from the Post-Anthropocene, which is procedural 3D modeling. I don't know if anyone knows about it. Okay, yeah, you should know about it. So these are 3D renders, which again states by the idea of the post-anthropocene, by the idea of speculative research and possible futures about what comes after the Anthropocene, and what will survive, who will survive, how will the Earth look like after that? How will the Anthropocene will end? Are we going to kill ourselves between us, between the nations? Are we going to a massive disease will end with us, or are we going to develop to a further, higher state of mind? So that's kind of the questions that from the post-Anthropocene are very, very interesting. So these are just for reference, for a visual concept. And I'm going to show you a workflow in Blender, this 3D software, and maybe you can adopt some ideas for that. I will just scroll down very quickly. These renders are, all the structures, all the geometries are worked in a procedural way, and then textures and the textures and the coloring and the lining of the scene is after that is work and developed, and so this is all some ideas about it. And so it's everything about this. This involves another technique which is called hard surface modeling and 3D scanning. Yeah.
So what is it that these structures represent or are modeled of?
What
is it that these structures are, like, are they like cities or?
Okay, I get it. Well, for example, these works are divided in series, and each series is for a specific problem. For example, the fourth series is about the possibilities of new organisms that are mixed with artificial machines that were left by humans. So these are kind of imaginative organisms that are kind of mixed with industrial and electronic garbage. So these are some of the ideas that, and the techniques are 3D hard surface modeling, and if you can see some stuff over here, this is a 3D scanning of an actual engine, motorcycle engine. So everything is mixed and blend. So the possibilities can, well, for the aim that it could be seen as a unique organism. Right? So this is the last one for this series, and again this is hard surface modeling and procedural modeling and 3D scanning. So these of course are fixed renders, these are just images. But what I would like to share with you is procedural animation. So this is an example of procedural animation. All the figures and all the geometries that you will see here were made for true data extrapolation from MIR analysis. I don't know, everyone knows what is MIR, right? Musical information retrieval. Yeah, it's a computational technique to extract some data from the audio. Descriptors, which are about frequency or spectrum or amplitude, and there are low or high level descriptors. Sorry. So the main source of for this image was a poem from Antonin Artaud, which was read by a colleague at the university, and I asked her to read it in different ways. You know, the same poem in 5 or different ways. So I could get different data from the same source, and then I made a very basic MIR computation technique, and then I got some data from that, and from the data I built the structures, the geometric structures, and then I create from the structures. Then I made the electronic base, and then the electronic base also served as an animation for the structures, and the final work was used for some kind of open partiture. What's the word for partitura? For score. For an open score, you know, as a kind of a graphical score, and then the visual structures are interpreted as a graphical scores for acoustic guitar improvisation. So. Of course, there are effects that were added in post production, but you know, you get the idea. So these are the structures which were created through the data from the MIR techniques. So this is kind of the first part, and then we got some kind of CD. Something like that. So the way I work, and which is what I will try to share with you, is the use of textures, which you can see over here, the different textures, which are also procedural textures, and a very specific lining use over the geometric structures, and also the use of the lining as from a parametric point of view, you know, and rotations from camera. Closings and stuff like that. You know, these are just basic framework things for visual stuff, but this is the idea. And for example, this is the part after that, more of that kind of CD. Then the CD goes away, and we got this kind of that's the voice of the colleague reading the poem, so it's kind of interesting to see.
creo ni en el bien ni en el mal. Si siento tal disposición a destruir, si en el orden de los principios no hay nada a lo que yo pueda razonablemente acceder, el principio mismo está en mi carne. Destruyo porque en mí todo lo que proviene de la razón lo resiste. No creo ya sino en la evidencia de lo que agita mis médulas y no de lo que se dirige a mi razón. He hallado tramos en el campo del nervio. Ahora me siento capaz de comparar la evidencia. Hay para mí una evidencia en el campo de la carne pura que no tiene nada que ver con la evidencia de la razón. El conflicto eterno de la razón y el corazón se desempata en mi propia carne, pero en mi carne irrigada de nervios.
So that's the basic idea, and from this idea also I made another work, which is called homeomorphism. Here it is. So the workflow is very similar, but here the animation is completely reacting to the sound. Is completely reactive. So you can see that the turning of the figure, the lining, are responding directly to the sound. It's also an improvisation, and also the geometries are procedural. So the secret, if you can think about it, that makes this kind of look so, well, at least to me, so organic in the lighting, is just a very basic split of the frequencies, and each split or each band of the frequency is mapped into a position of different lights. So you can think about that there are kind of 13 or 20 different lights that are activated with when different frequencies appear in the sound. So we got this kind of lightings pointing around. And for example, so each of these structures are completely procedural. The idea is to begin with a basic geometric shape, like a square or like a cube, and then you make a whole of different process over that to form, and then make, for example, this sphere is completely destroyed and is segmented through tessellation techniques, and then through mesh, it's converted into mesh, and then it's merged with this second structure, which is the wireframe. So for example, we go, this is another structure. So you can see that there are, for example, over here, there are some kind of things that are appearing and disappearing. It's the same structure, but because it is segmented, I can use different parameters to control the density of the structure. Then here is more, this part is more kind of, it's more clear, I think, on that idea of density. So I can control the density of the original structure to almost destroy it and or to make it completely. Here it is. For example, this is the last structure, which is always the same idea: procedural, density, tessellation, and merge with another geometric, a more linear structure. Again, the same idea: density, changing density. Of course, the music is completely rhythmic. This is what I've been working, and or at least I call it electroacoustic techno. I don't know if that bothers some composers, but that's the way I call it. Because the main idea is to create very rhythmic patterns with electroacoustic language. So I think it will bother many composers, but. So, any comments or questions?
Is the export is made on Blender?
Yeah. All this stuff was made on Blender.
So the lightning that changes, it's good for the interactivity with the interactive stuff, like the lightning going on in and out with the music. So Blender can receive that.
Blender you can completely control and make automatization, or you can also receive OSC from any other application.
So that was from OSC, or it was?
No, this is animation. This was completely. I get, for example, for this part. For example, well, the beginning. I think the beginning is more. For example, I got this scene, and then I began to rotate the camera, and then I made this process that I was talking about at the beginning. That I get the sound into Blender, and then I divide it into different band frequencies. So, for example, here are kind of 13 band frequencies, and then I map each band frequency to control each one of the lightnings. And yeah.
Have you ever used other softwares to do that kind of stuff, or just Blender?
I have used Houdini, which is a very powerful software, and right now I'm getting into Rhino and Notch, but Notch is very expensive, so I think I will stay with Rhino and Houdini and Blade.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions?
In your discourse about post-Anthropocene, what would you say of the aesthetic choice of keeping in your frame trace of the design of the software as a trace of lines, of wire, and those kind of things mixed to the 3D renders?
You mean this line?
Yes.
Lines?
Oh.
The lines that are... these are because, from my personal point of view, it's not completely from the aesthetic point of view, but it's more a functional point of view, because I use here a very basic, Gestalt technique, which is about the figure, fondo, figura is fondo?
Background foreground.
Background foreground. So these lines or these linear structures help to kind of make a framework for the procedural for the more abstract and more irregular structure.
Is it a strategy to
Yeah.
give trace of perspective,
Yeah,
reference
exactly.
as the line of the horizon that you were in place?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's a more functional object. I also use this idea when I make multi-channel music. For example, if I want to make to the listener a more clear idea of distance, I need to use, for example, at least two sound sources. You know, it's not for me, or at least from my perspective, it's not enough just to use the bebop or ambisonics to put a virtual sound over here, for example. So from a psychoacoustical point of view and from a perceptual point of view, you need another reference point to get, so your brain can get the distance, and so your brain can get an idea of the spatiality. It's not enough with one source because it's anti-natural, one source. We don't hear anywhere just one source. And visual, in visual realm is very, very analog, right? So I use a lot of this stuff just to create a framework so the people who is looking at this do not get lost through the irregular forms. And so I get these very linear and very regular structures to kind of concentrate the irregular structure. Is that clear?
Yes, I can propose it is also a trace of different levels of perception in the same times of different level of render or in the same place. Yeah. There is in the same picture there is render, but there is this is, I understand that is an help to a perspective perception, but it's also a trace of the control, the different perception with the render, the wire, in the same time, which is also a discourse about different universe in the same time.
Okay, I haven't thought about, but it's a very, very nice idea. Thank you very much. Anyone has another question? No? Okay. So maybe we can go to the fun part and begin to some examples. So I'm going to improvise a workflow on Blender, and I think, or I suppose that not all of you have worked in Blender before, but please just see this as a general example of a workflow that you could use for if you want to add some visual or procedural animation in your personal projects. So do not worry too much about the tools or the process that I need to choose this object and then I need to click over here. Do not worry about that, because there are a lot of tutorials online that you could see anytime. So maybe it could be more useful if you just try to get the idea of the workflow. Yeah. So this is Blender. ¿Aquí no me oye, verdad?
No, casi no, si quieres pégatelo más, te cambio de micro si quieres.
Sí. ¿Aquí me oigo? Ahí sí. Como que me quedo así.
Si no, te pongo otro. Tú sigue. Ahora lo pongo más cómodo. Tú sigue.
So this is Blender, and this is the first thing we get when we open Blender for the first time. And this is a cube, and I'm going to delete this cube, and I'm going to make a very basic example of the formation of a geometric object. So For example, I'm going to open a plane. This is a plane. And then I'm going to subdivide it. And as you can see, the first time I get this plane, it has no subdivision, so I cannot deform it because it's just a one piece. So I need to subdivide this. And if I subdivide this, for example, I don't know, 20 times, then you can see there are a lot of small squares. These, of course, are 20 for 20. And then I'm going to subdivide it again, maybe that. So this might appear very basic, but it's, if you can understand this idea, then you can apply it to any software or any framework. So these points are the points that you can, or the control points where you can transform your figure. Okay. So right now we got not too many points because we could get more. But also, if I subdivide it further, then my computer will get more. It will be more hard to my computer to process all the information. So, what I'm doing here, if you can see that, is I'm changing between two modes. This is the object mode, and this is the edit mode. The edit mode allows me to control or to affect the geometry, the internal geometry of the figure, and then the object mode is kind of the surface of the object, right? So, the very first and basic transformation, I'm going here to the modifiers section, is what is called displace. So, I'm going to add a displace tool, and I'm going to add a texture for this displace, okay? So you can use any image to displace your figure. For example, if you got an image from a landscape, you could use it in order to kind of make a 3D representation of that image in your figure. So. Right now, I'm going to use noise algorithm for the displays, which could be, for example, this. Okay. And so I think from this view is more clear how the plane is subdivided, right? Because you have these very different heights of the plane, and so you can, for example, play with all the parameters over here. For example, I can change the size of the noise of the clouds, for example, something like that. If you want something more kind of that, or if you want a more small definition of the noise, then you can scroll down. For example, I'm going to use right now parameter over here. Yeah, it looks good. Okay. You can change also the depth, but I'm going to use, for example, if I turn down the depth, I got the difference of the heights of each one of the subdivisions gets very normalized, as you can see. If I go up, then the subdivisions begin to get randomized over the height. So I'm going to use, I think I will keep the depth very, very soft, something like that. And then I can also control the intensity of the displays, right? So as you can, right now, as you can imagine, this could be a very basic parametric parameter for animation. I can automatize this and play with that and make it maybe to respond to the sound, something like that, right? So, for example, I'm going to leave this over here, that, and because I want to get a more soft resolution, I will make this shade smooth, and then as you can see, the surface gets smooth, right? So I want just to make another step. No, I want to keep. Okay, so right now we got a very basic, for example, geometry, which we can add an automatization to, maybe to react to the sound, or we can draw the automatization completely by hand, right? So one of the ideas that I always talk about when I teach stuff like this to the students at the university is that it's very important to be able to recognize the limits of each parameter. So what I want to say is that you have a lot of parameters, and you have, before you go further and automatize each one of the parameters, you need to explore all the possibilities of each parameter, but not only by each parameter by themselves, but in combination with all the other parameters. So for example, if I move this, it's kind of interesting, but I will get bored after 3 seconds, right? If this will be the only move, this will be very boring after 3 or 5 seconds. So what can I do is to combine this parameter, the strength, with another parameter from the noise. For example, this, right? So I got this another one parameter which I can use in combination with the other parameter, and then it gives me a more interesting results, right? So one of I think that, or from the pieces that I have seen from multimedia that make an interactive or reactive use of the sound for controlling the geometry of the figures, is that they are always changing the boundaries of the parameters. What I want to say with that is that, for example, the first idea would be to just, use something like that, right? So we need to kind of make a classification of the possibilities or the range of the parameters. So we do not spend all our possibilities in just 2 or 3 minutes. So for example, we got that. If we could, for example, we could begin with this, for example, okay? And also, it's a very important the use of, or at least to me, is a very important the use of the camera. The angle of the camera is will give you a powerful tool to in order not to create another scene and render and get a lot of new material from the same scene. For example, if I make a scene from this, and for example, I rotate this, so I can move this rotation, I get a possibility, right? But I can rotate this over the Z-axis, and I get another possibility. So right now, if I have 3 axes, I have 3 parameters to control, and then I have, for example, this size parameter, which will be 4, and then I have this depth, which will be 5, and then I got 6 and 7 parameters, which in combination I can create an interesting animation from a very basic, very basic structure, right? So for example, let's try to make an animation of that. So I'm going to, okay, let's begin with that. We have, for example, we have over here our timeline. So we have from frame 1, and we have up to frame 20, 250. So if I press play right now, it's not doing anything, of course. So I can add more frames, or I can work from very short scenes and then render data scenes and then mix that scenes in a post-production software like Adobe Premiere or something like that. So, for example, let's try to let me change the rotation of this. Something like that. I want to, yeah, I think that's a good starting point. Something like that. Okay. So I'm going to scale this up just a little bit. Okay. So, for example, I imagine this very basic scene as it begins with no transformation and slowly begins to deformate. Okay. So we can begin with this very low level displays. So I'm going to add a control point which will record this value over my timeline here. So as you can see, we got a yellow point here over the timeline. And then, for example, I go to frame 128 and then I change, for example, over here and I record the point. Then I can go, for example, over here and go down and I record the point. And then I can go, for example, over here and going again something like this and record the point. Okay? So I got 1, 2, 3, and 4 control points which make an automatization for this parameter. I'm going to play with this other parameter which is the size. So I want to, for example, begin with a very high size. I will record again. Then over here I want to get it just a little bit down. And then over here maybe I'm just a bit further down. And then over here I can think about going up. And to the end I can go down again. Okay? So I got, right now we got 2 parameters. So we can go on and play with the rotation of the plane. So I'm going to play with that. For example, if I do this, I will play with the rotation over the x-axis, sorry. And then I will go down, and then I want to show me that the figure show me in front of me, get complete in front of me. And then I want to, then from that point I want that it goes completely from the side view, but also I want to play with the other axis so I can get some kind of random movement. So for example, I can go and play with the J, something like this, maybe. Something like this. Okay. So this was a completely random animation. Okay. So I can, of course, I can play with the rotation of the camera itself. So I want to do that. Maybe, and also I can play with the with the close-up of the camera. So if I go over here, where's my camera? Here. So, for example, I can add a perspective control tool in order to control my rotation of the camera. This is an empty axis coordinate system, which I'm going to join with this camera. So when I rotate this coordinate system, the camera gets joined to that, and the camera rotates with that. So I'm going to do this. Oh, sorry. So, for example, if I rotate this, no, this is, I made it the wrong, made it in the wrong order. I need to select first the camera and the axis. Everything is okay. This would be, yeah. So as you can see, when I'm rotating the coordinate system, I'm rotating also the camera, so I can get full 360. Yeah, you get the link. So this is another set of parameters that I can control. So for example, I can make a complete scene around the geometric shape. For example, I can go over here, record the rotation of the control points, then I can go like this, maybe something like this, then I can go like this, and something like this. So my final short animation will look something like this. So as you can see, it looks more interesting than the previous one, only adding a camera perspective control. But this is not, this is only the beginning, because in regards to the idea that we were talking before, we need a perspective contrast, right? So, and the most basic perspective contrast will be a flat plane to get some kind of a background, right? So I'm going to add another plane, which will be my background, in order to be easier for me to get the spatial kind of perspective of the object. Okay, so I'm going to control this over here, maybe do this over here, and then if I go to my render view, okay, of course, I have no line here, or the light is over here, so I need to. Yeah, as you can see, the light is down the plane, so I need to place it over here. So right now, I need to place correctly, or I need to place the light if I want to get the result. So for example, I will use the light over here just for a simple beginning. And I'm going to change the color of the background in order to not get confused with the color of the shape itself. So I'm going to go over here, add a new material for the background, and I can go brighter, or I can go black. I think I will go brighter, and I will use this with another. I will give it a little basic coloration, just to get just to get the difference from the object and the background. So if I go around this, okay. Okay, yeah, because I was rotating the camera and then it gets overlapped with the background. So I need to control over that. I'm going to see the camera over here, okay? Okay, so right here in this point, the camera gets, the plane gets into the path of the camera, so I need to be sure that it doesn't happen. Okay. Maybe if I do something like this. Okay. And then I use.
Sorry, how do you choose the planes in the collection?
Sorry?
How do you choose planes in the collection? You know where is this selected in the plane?
Where I choose plane?
Yeah, because I only have camera keyboard light.
If you press Shift A, and then you got this menu over here. Shift A, and then you got where the first option is called mesh, and then the first option is called plane. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, because I made a very crazy camera movement. The first take of the camera gets down the plane, so I'm going to duplicate this plane. I'm going to use it over here. So, for example, I do that, and then I'm going to begin. It's a very good example, so I can begin adding some lightnings. Okay. So, for example, I can add lightnings over the plane, near the plane. These are individual lightnings, which will give a more useful perspective of the figure, as you can see. So I can place it near the plane or over the plane, and then I go over here. Okay. Yeah. So I think this plane is not working at all, but yeah. So as you can see, I can make a very easy, very basic animations or deformation of geometric figures with simple basic steps. So it's not, and as you can see, with Blender it's very easy to do that. So we can go further and add some more interesting deformations of the plane. So let's take this plane again, and let's add some other deformations. For example, the one I use a lot. We can add, for example, the wireframe. See what happens. So let's see what happens with the wireframe. As you can see, it gives a completely different. Let me just change the background. So we can add also another light. Stronger light. Okay. So a nice workflow is to check each section of the animation and work with the lighting. So for me, the lighting is one of the most important aspects of the animation, because it will give you, it will make your work to look very professional. Although you can, but you don't need to work with very complex shapes. But if you make a very complex lighting, it will get a very professional looking. So, for example, we can add. Of course, the lighting is a very subtle work, but it pays pays off. Okay. So, let's think that we are happy with the result and we need to create more geometric figures for this, but we don't want to begin from the beginning and repeat each step. So what we are going to do is just duplicate this shape with Shift D, and then I got another, as you can see, I got the same figure but duplicated, and then I can use the same idea that we were talking about the merge of different figures in order to get some of gestalt coherence of the visual scene. For example, I'm going to use the exact same figure, but I will rotate it in the axis, in the z-axis, just to get a very basic variation of it. So, for example, if I do this, just by doing this, for example, you can see okay. So the possibilities are endless, right? Or I can even place it further away from the beginning, from the initial figure, like that. Like that. Okay. So let's. Any questions to hear that? Okay. So let's erase this and let's begin with another figure and with a more complex process. For example, I will begin with this cube and I will make a tessellation by hand. So I will subdivide it again a lot of times. For example, something like this. Maybe another one. Yeah, something like this. And then what I like to do a lot is this process. I don't know if anyone else do that, but I like to do it. And then I select random faces from the cube, and then I erase it. And what I got is this. As you can see, it's the cube, but with this tessellation. It's a very easy way to get more interesting pattern from the basic figure. Okay, and I can do this same very process to any figure. For example, if I select GBG sphere, I make the exact same process. I subdivide this, and for example, I select random, and I erase the faces, and then I got this work. Okay, let's begin. Let's try to get somewhere with this. Let's try to get somewhere with this basic configuration. Okay, so I'm going to add right now. I'm going to add more interesting modifier, which is the remesh. This remesh, what does is to make a new connection between the vertices of the figure. So as you can see, I got without the mesh and with the mesh, then I got the same overall geometric figure, but the vertices inside it are connected in different ways. So it gives me a very interesting, as you can see, a more interesting looking for that. So I think this is looks actually pretty good. Then I will add another modifier because right now it has no volume; it's completely flat. So I want to get, so I want to add it a volume. So, for example, I can solidify it, and as you can see, it adds a second layer of over the figure, and it gives me a kind of volume from the figure. So I'm going to shade smooth. Okay. So if I go further with the thickness, I get this, and I begin with then I begin getting a more interesting shape. Okay. So I think this looks fine. I will let this over here, and I will be working with the sphere. Okay. I will work again with the remesh from Subway. I don't know why. Okay. And this is a very nice mode of the remesh. As you can see, what this is doing is to create blocks from the vertices. Okay, so as you can see, this is without the remesh and then the remesh. So, for example, if I go further with the depth of the remesh, I got textures like this, which are very, very interesting. Or at least I like to use it. I can play with this. Then let's use this, and then let's try to merge these two objects in order to get a final coherent figure. Okay. So, for example, let's take the view of the camera, and then let's begin with the composition of the scene. Okay. So this is of course the composition of the scene itself. So I got a lot of possibilities here. I can choose. Well, I need to choose first what's the object I want to be the principal or the main object to go in front of the view. So, for example, I can make this smaller, then which is the main character will be the sphere, okay? Or I can make some kind of balance between both of them, right? For example, this is a nice configuration, but I can begin rotating a little bit in order to get more complex stuff. For example, this looks kind of ice cream, I don't know. And then, or I can go further. Let's try something like this. Okay. This is very testing work. You know, you have to spend a lot of time testing possibilities. You need to stay with that idea. So, for example, over here. Okay, and I think I can duplicate this, and I can use it with different parameters for the remesh. Okay, this is fine. This is fine. As you can see, I got from the same figure. I don't need to repeat the whole process. I can recycle my figures, and I got, because this is procedural, this is the advantage of the procedural, because so when I change the value of one parameter, I get a completely different result. So that's the advantage of the procedural working. So as you can see, I got this more dotted kind of a structure, which I can use as a framework for the whole figure, for example, something like this. And then I can go further with this. Okay. Then I will duplicate this sphere. I will go lower with the depth of the shape. For example. Okay. Then play with rotation. Okay. Maybe it's a possibility. Go bigger with this stuff. So Okay, so I got this basic stuff, and I will just sorry, I want to. I cannot find those. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, it's fine. So let me just select all these figures, make it bigger, put it over here, then I will rotate over just to get the perspective that fits more on me. So as you can see, only with a small change of perspective, the object can change completely, at least for the perceptual point of view. So this object is completely different from the first one. So I think this looks more interesting. Good. Something like this. And let's take a look at the render. So I can add more lightning here. I will add it very, very quickly just to get some idea of that. So as you can see, I can begin lighting all the dark areas in order to get, all the details of those areas do not get lost with darkness of the sea. For example, you can see as when I get more and more lights, I get more, the geometric structure of the figure appears more clearer, with more clarity. So for example, over here and over here, for example. Okay? And so yeah, I got this very, very basic procedural figure, which I can animate in the way I want. I can stay with this kind of monochrome view, but also I can play with the color of the lightning, for example, add some color for the lightnings in order to get just a basic sensation of heat or cold, you know, very, very good. Like this, just adding very light coloration to the light gives me a different sensations over the areas of the structures. I will add another light over here. So for example, this, I will something like that. And also it gives, I think it adds more interesting focal points of attention to the viewer, you know. So it's not completely flat, but it kind of tracks the eye into different directions. So this could be very, very high. So I will go lower with the lightning. Of course. Yeah, something like that. Not too. And I will just finish this with a basic animation of this. So as you can see, how to do this. For example, as you can see, this is, for example, a parameter that I was using in the previous animation that I showed you before. So I can play with this parameter. As you can see, it's the density of the structure. So I can, for example, begin with this, and then I can go with this, and go with this. Oh, sorry. No. Yeah, something like that. Something like that, and like that. And I can do the same thing, exactly the same thing to the other figures. I will do it very, very quickly. this not, it's not responding very well. But this is, yeah, this is more responsive. This parameter is more responsive than the other. Okay. So let's take a look how we for the work we have done up to this point. So this as you can see is a very basic animation. I am running this animation with no overheating of my computer. It's very light. It doesn't need a very powerful computer in order to run it. But of course, I can get more and more complex with the more vertices I add to the figures, the more work to the computer will be to process that. And just a final comments about this is Blender has two render engines. This one is called Eevee. Sorry, this one is called Eevee. It's a very basic render engine because it's not ray tracing. I'm sure you know every one of you knows what ray tracing is. But if I change to cycles, then this engine does ray tracing. And
some of them are coming from music and many of them are coming from music or some design, so just clarify what ray tracing is.
Okay, sorry. Well, ray tracing is just a computational technique which is used mostly for video games, which tries to, it models the reflection and refraction of the light over the surface. So, as you can see, when we change to cycles engine, we got a more realistic perspective of the light over the surface. Because what it's doing is to mimic the light sources, and according to optic physics laws, it models with those physics to the reflection and refraction dynamics of the objects. So this is very different. For example, as you can see, this render is very, very different. Right here, you can see it as kind of with noise and granulation, because it's not completely rendered, because you need to render properly. This is just a preview of the render. And for example, here is, you can see here is a more clearer. Let me see if I can render this image. So as you can see, it takes a long to render just one frame. Okay? So it's taking more. It will be, I think, more than 2 minutes to render one frame. But yeah, no, it will take longer. let's cancel this because it will take longer. But yeah.
So if it takes 2 minutes to render one frame, the animation you made will take a lot of time to render and
a lot of time.
So like video games, how do they do to make it so light?
Yeah, these people, what they are doing is to they make a technique which is called sorry, I forgot the name, but the idea is to, for example, you get this figure, and then they make a downgrade of the number of the vertices of the figure, but the downgrade needs to be optimized in order to keep the original figure, but to have the least number of vertices to construct that figure. Yeah, and from that technique, the video games try to, the video games run in real time. Yeah, but they are also they are very optimized with different render engines. But yeah, the video games are a completely high level thing. Yeah. So as you can see, this is the Cycles engine, and if I change to Eevee, the view is completely different. And if I render this, I think it will not. Yeah, you know, it renders immediately. So, but as you can see, the details of the textures are lost. You only get a very flat idea, which could be very useful when you animate some stuff like geometric and things like that. But when you, for example, when you are working with stuff like this, when you want texture, when you want the detail, when you want the detail of the light over the textures, well, you need to get a ray tracing engine. Yeah.
So just by curiosity, how much did it take to render this one?
This one took about 2 hours, something like that. With this machine, no, but I have another computer in my house, which is our RTX 2080 Ti. It's a 10 gigabytes video card. So, yeah, because it has a lot of details, you know. As you can see over here, there are a lot of details over each one of the elements. So the light needs to, or the engine needs to model the way the light reflects and refracts over all these small details. So it's a lot of information that needs to be coded. This is my book. Okay. So just to maybe to this to be useful to you in practical terms, you can choose to do this in Blender. You can choose to do this in any other software you might like. You have, for example, 3ds Maya, and you can do it in Houdini. Houdini is a very powerful engine. It's also kind of expensive, but if you are at school, you can buy it with your student card, and it gives you a very nice discount. And Rhino 3D is another software that is very, very powerful. It's used more for architectural designs, but it's also very powerful for parametric and procedural designs. And Blender, I choose Blender because it's free. It's not completely open source, but it's free, and it has a very large community. I think it's one of the largest community for visual tools. And there are a lot of tutorials. There are a lot of Blender gurus over there which teach you incredible techniques and which you can adapt to get things like this. Right? So, you know, as I told you before, the idea is not to get lost in step 1 to choose this object, step 2 pick over here, and step 3 select this two. You know, the main idea for this time or this workshop will be to get the whole overview of the process of what means to be procedural, to get a procedural animation. And that idea will be, if I could resume that, would be to begin with a basic geometric shape and deform or convert it completely into something like this. And because it's procedural, when you change a parameter just a little bit, you get a completely different result. And so you can recycle very easily, and you can get a lot of new material with a very few steps. So that's kind of the advantage of the procedural techniques. And for example, this was done in ray tracing, so you can get the idea of the details. And for example, just to give you an idea, the main scene of this, which lasts about 2 or 3 minutes. For example, this took about 2 days. 2 days, not stopping. It would be 48 hours for 2 minutes. So yeah, the bill from the light was too high. Because, for example, this is completely ray tracing. I needed to be ray tracing because otherwise the details could not be very clear. So as you can see, the ray tracing is also very powerful because you also get the shadows of this very light tessellation over the flat figure. So, and just another, for example, this is another example of procedural deformation. This took about 2 weeks, something like that, rather.
For example, in the example that you were showing now, you did the animation, procedural animation, and then the music became after. So what was clarify what was the link between both things? I mean, you were using the animation as a score, and then you have like the performance live, and you added the live performance of the sound to the animation, right?
Yeah, this, for example, I made the electronic bass, the music electronic bass, and then from that I made the reactive animation, and then when that was all complete, I made the improvisation with the guitar and with the objects.
So for you to make the reactive animation, you were working like with a kind of wireframe or basic animation thing, and then you did the final rendering.
No,
Just to explain what was the steps, because if you're taking 2 minutes to do one frame, just to understand clearly how you relate the live music with the
well, the live music it was actually the last step. So the process was very straightforward in the sense that first I create the kind of a script, something like that, for each one of the scenes, and then I made the basic music, which is the one that sounds kind of techno or something like that, and with that music composed, I made the scenes reactive to that music with the lighting, with the camera views, and when this basic sound or this basic music and the final procedural animation was made, then I used that as a kind of a graphical score for improvisation, which is what you see over here. And then that was recorded and then was added into the music that was composed before.
Yes, kind of coming back.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop. Yeah. So just one last example. This one that I was talking about to you that took about 2 weeks. Mostly because I didn't have too much experience at rendering settings, because rendering settings is also an area itself. You need to have very basic values and parameters to get the most of your gear, most of your GPU and most of your CPU. But for example, this is a plane that like the one that we saw. This is just a plane, which is deformed with the displays that like the one we saw. But then I added a procedural texture to it that is changing over here. So you get this like whale skin or something like that. architecture, which are this kind of manchas, ¿cómo sería la palabra? Stacks, and then the holes, and then the little, this kind of very detailed arrugas, ¿cómo se llama? Arrugas, como shrinks, yeah. And there also is the light. The light again is playing a very important role over to get some areas more highlighted than others, to get different points of attraction dynamically over for the viewer. So you don't get stuck into one point, and the lighting kind of guides you to during your vision, kind of light guides your vision to different points of the light. Yeah, so maybe it's so I don't know if anyone has any questions or something like that. Then we can go get some rest or something like that.
Yeah, so one last question for me. Have you ever thought of using Touch Designer for that kind of result?
I'm sorry, dude.
Have you ever thought of using Touch Designer for that kind of result?
Oh, yeah, I use Touch Designer for live, but because Touch Designer is for live visuals, it doesn't have a render engine. So I think the last version, the last that they just got, it does have a render engine, but it's only the last one, if I'm correct.
Well, yeah, it's been 2 or 3 years.
Well, you can render with the movie file out top.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
it's okay, but it's not.
But I mean a render engine like a ray tracing, it's not completely done in Touch Designer.
I see.
But we can work. I have seen a lot of people getting incredible results from Touch. Incredible results, I mean. But the main results I have seen are more like for live electronics, you know. For not live electronics, but for live visuals.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think it would be hard to get the detail of the ray tracing of this because it's live, you know. The machine is running each frame.
Mostly with the 3D. 3D is I think way better in Blender.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Probably the shading of the lights is better.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, I mean just I can show you this and then we can go to sleep or go for a beer or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely recommend to work in Touch Designer. Again, if you have your student card, you can get an educational discount. Where are my projects? Well, maybe I can prepare that for tomorrow because it will be hard to find my projects right now. But yeah, if you like, we can see some Touch Designer stuff. I mean, that could be interesting too. But yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, we can stop.
Mm-hmm.
So